Happy Tuesday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. It's going to be an interesting day. As I'm speaking right now, we're really kind of in the midst of a press conference involving Todd Monken, the Georgia offensive coordinator, JT Daniels, the Georgia quarterback. We will get some from Connor Riley on that in a couple of minutes, reaction to what both the Georgia offensive coordinator and starting quarterback have to say on that. We'll do that coming up in a couple of minutes' time. Before that, I want to give you more of my thoughts on Georgia's preparations for the Peach Bowl and how the program can use what's going to happen on Friday against Cincinnati as a springboard for the future. We'll do a lot of that. We'll celebrate Brock Vandegrift winning a state championship yesterday as well. It is a busy show. A little bit of rumor mill stuff, too, before we're done. Probably irresponsible, but we'll do our best to keep it between the banks. We'll do a lot of fun stuff on the program today. Glad to have you with us. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
A little bit of an interesting day in that, for the most part, when we do this show live, and most of you don't watch or listen live, you listen later on, but for those of you who are with us live, you know we do this during the 10 o'clock hour each and every day, and for the most part, there's not typically a lot of news breaking while we're on the air. Today is a little bit different in that, as I'm speaking to you live here, Todd Monken, the Georgia offensive coordinator, JT Daniels, the Georgia starting quarterback, are getting ready to meet with reporters. So that's happening as we're doing the show today. We'll be lucky enough to catch up in a couple of minutes with someone who's there, a part of that press conference. We will talk to Connor Riley about what Daniels and Monken have to say. It's interesting to hear from Monken because obviously you don't hear from him throughout the season, so there will be a lot of intrigue by what he says and what thoughts he shares about his first season on campus as Georgia's offensive coordinator. All of that coming up in just a couple of minutes. Let me, though, before we get to that, say this. That my favorite thing about college football, and I think about this a lot, I do truly believe this is my favorite thing about the sport, is the way that one year kind of bleeds into the next. This is not like a kind of a finite, situation where when the season ends, everything is just over. There's not a season finale, so to speak, in college football. There is a last game, but the sport itself kind of keeps on chugging and keeps on turning. Recruiting's a part of that. Transfer portal now is a big part of that. Coaching, hiring and firing and maneuvering, all of that, kind of just bleeds over. That the month of December into January, you kind of see this kind of fusion of the end of one year and the start of a new year, but the actual business of college football almost never truly stops. It just kind of keeps on spinning, kind of keeps on going. Let me give you a specific example of exactly what I mean by that. Let's compare two SEC programs here for a moment. Let's talk about Alabama from this year, and let's talk about LSU from last year. Now, at first blush, there is a lot about both of these teams that look very, very similar, right? LSU kind of plowed through the SEC on the way towards a national championship last season. Alabama may be on the verge of doing the same kind of thing this year. At first blush, at first glance, they seem very similar. But there is an aspect of these two entities that is, I would say, a pretty good bit different. While LSU last year may be one of the greatest teams I've ever seen, certainly offensively they set records, the fact of the matter is, in carrying over from one year to the next, they actually proved not to be very good at doing that. That passing the baton from the Joe Burrow era to what's happened at quarterback for them after that, and from Joe Brady, their passing game coordinator, to what's happened for them from a coaching standpoint after that, has kind of proven not to be very good. Not the ability to kind of transition, they weren't very successful doing so. Alabama, it does not give me any great pleasure to say, has had an amazing transition from the Tua Tagovailoa era and some of the things that they've had going on the last couple of years. Mac Jones, who almost no one would have predicted to have the success that he's had. Alabama's actually been every bit as good offensively as LSU was probably a year ago. They're talking about 3 of the top 5 Heisman, finalists. It is an amazing run for Alabama. And I think what that illustrates here, and I'll explain how this gets to Georgia, but what that illustrates is that in 2019, LSU may have been a very good team, but in 2020, Alabama illustrated what kind of program it is. And I think ultimately it's far more important to have a great program than it is to have a great team. And if you really listen to the things that we say about Georgia on a daily basis around here, I think most of our conversations are kind of, in the vein of what can Georgia do to keep the program strong. Obviously, we want to see Georgia have individual team success on an individual year basis. We want to see this team once, eventually honored as a national champion. And obviously, there's a little bit of jealousy with the fact that LSU got to do that in 2019. But ultimately, and I've said this a lot, that the goal for Georgia and the goal for all of the truly elite programs in college football is more than just winning a national championship. It's establishing yourself as a perennial contender year after year, to be a great program more than just kind of a flash-in-the-pan great team. Those kinds of things have a way of not really lasting the test of time. And so if you want to say, well, what is the definition then of a great program? How do you prove your worth as a program? I think it comes down to your past, your present, and your future. That's really how you demonstrate your program. If you're a great team, that's all about present. You may have transfer quarterback, you may have hotshot up-and-coming coach, you may have a lot of things going for you in a given moment, but if you can't transition that from one year to the next, you were a great team, but you were not a great program. That you've got to have all three phases. You've got to have the recent past on your side, you've got to have good things going on for you in the present, and you've obviously got to have reason for optimism in the future if you want to be a great program. And that's one of the things I believe that makes the Peach Bowl really interesting for Georgia heading on Friday, is that I do think you see some remnants, some evidence to suggest that you ever watch like the State of the Union, the president giving a speech, whichever president you want to pick for this, they always like to say that the State of the Union is strong. Well, I think that you see some evidence for Georgia going into the Peach Bowl that the state of the program is strong. Maybe not perfect. There's obviously some things, whether it be nitpicking on the field or other issues with the program that maybe some fans wish was a little bit different, and that's always going to be true. But the overall state of the program is strong. There is things to feel good about both the past, present, and future for Georgia. Let me illustrate that right now, and let me look at a specific position group to be able to do that. I'm going to talk cornerbacks for a moment. Cornerback, obviously, an important position, but the reason why I bring that up here on today's show is because I think it illustrates everything that I just said. The strength of the past, the strength of the present, and potentially the strength of the future for Georgia. If you want to feel good about UGA moving forward, I think you can look at cornerback and feel pretty good about that. First of all, let me start with the past here. There is a guy who now has announced that he is in Georgia's past. Eric Stokes, as Kirby Smart essentially confirmed when he spoke with reporters this week. Stokes himself now making it official on Twitter, saying that he wants to opt out for the bowl game. He's moving on to the NFL draft. And there's one particular sentence I want to read from you. If you're watching a video, you see the full statement. It's obviously hard for you to read all of this. But there's one sentence I want to highlight on this particular. Stokes says, "I want to give thanks to Coach Smart, Coach Warren, and Coach Tucker," that's the old defensive coordinator, "for believing in a skinny a defensive back from Covington who could potentially or eventually become an All-American." That's what Eric Stokes says. And isn't that an amazing statement about Georgia's past, that you did take someone like Eric Stokes, who was kind of lightly recruited as a part of the 2017 class, the kind of guy that someone like me back then probably just didn't know very much about. And yet he has emerged as an All-American level player, a potentially very high draft pick, that Georgia can look back on its recent past and say, hey, look how good and how well we developed a player like Eric Stokes. And it obviously does become a commercial for future players to come to Georgia and get that same kind of development. That Kirby Smart can say, and Dan Lanning can say, and Charlton Warren can say, hey, look at the way we developed this guy. This guy was not an elite recruit, but we turned him into an elite player. This is what our recent past here as at Georgia, and that obviously speaks to program strength. And I think you're a Georgia fan, you feel pretty good about that. But what we've also heard a little bit over the last couple of days is, BA, we want Georgia to be more than just a factory for future NFL stars. We don't want Georgia to be the Columbus Clippers or the Pawtucket Red Sox or the whichever other minor league team that you want to mention here. We don't want Georgia to be just a minor league team that feeds talent to the NFL. We want playing college football, wearing the silver breeches. We want that to mean something too, and I totally understand that, and I frankly feel the same way. What you're saying is we don't want just the guys here in the past to move on to great NFL success. We want to feel good about what's going on in the present here at Georgia as well. And once again, we can turn to the cornerback position for Georgia to feel pretty good about some of that heading towards the Peach Bowl on Friday. If you want to believe that it matters, playing for Georgia, wearing this uniform, maintaining your commitment, so to speak, to the program, if you want to believe that truly matters, then I think you love what Georgia cornerback Tyson Campbell himself, also a guy who may be a very high draft pick, if and when he goes to the league this year or waits to go next year one way or another. Draft scouts are probably going to like Tyson Campbell a lot, and Georgia fans certainly like what Campbell said yesterday about wanting to still play against Cincinnati, wanting to still be a part of this team this season. If you're a Georgia fan looking for clues that the present tense for Georgia is going pretty well, this is certainly an example of that. Here is Tyson Campbell.
I'm still a Georgia Bulldog, so, my task is to, finish out the season. I'm still part of this team, and, we have one game left. So I want to finish this season, with my teammates.
I probably don't get as stressed out about opt-outs as some people do. However, I do respect some of the reasons why people get concerned about the opt-out trend, whether it be at Georgia, around the rest of college football. They ask questions about what does this say about the culture of the program if guys are doing this? Well, I think you should fairly ask that on both sides. What does it say about the culture of the program? And a guy like Tyson Campbell says, I'm still a Georgia Bulldog, and I still want to be a part of this thing, and I still want to go out there and do that. That's a pretty good commercial for what Georgia is right now in the present tense, the culture remaining very strong. Once again, if you're a Georgia fan wanting to feel good about the program, I think that gives you some evidence to be able to do that. But to truly maintain your status as an elite program, as one of the top flight, institutions in college football, it's got to be about more than just the past. It's got to be more about just the present. It's got to be about the future as well. And if you want to stay at cornerback here just for a minute, also interesting to hear from Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning today, because let's face it, we know Eric Stokes is gone. He is, as I said before, in the past now for Georgia. We presume that Tyson Campbell very soon could also be in the past for these Dogs. So what does the future hold? Well, how about five-star cornerback Keely Ringo, who has spent this year injured, away from the watchful eye of people like you and me, but apparently doing a little bit more at practice and apparently setting himself up for potentially great success in 2021. This was fun from Dan Lanning yesterday.
Keely's been able to actually practice with us more and more as the season's gone on. He's not ready for competition yet, but I'm really excited about, sometimes you worry about a guy that has an injury. How mentally engaged are they going to be able to be throughout the season? It's tough when you're not going to play a game. And I've been impressed with Keely's attention to detail, really picking up some schematic pieces of our defense.
So listen, I don't yet know what's going to happen for Georgia against Cincinnati on Friday. I'm not ready to make my prediction on that. But I do feel good about where the Georgia program is heading into the game and where the Georgia program will be going after the game. And I think that the cornerback position illustrates that. Guys in the past have been developed and they're on their way to NFL draft success. Guys in the present planning on playing on Friday saying, I'm still very happy to be a Georgia Bulldog, glad to be a part of this program. And guys in the future ready to step in, waiting in the wings for their chance to go on to start them themselves. You couldn't ask for more than that if you're a college football fan. You can't deliver more than that if you're a college football program, and that seems to be what Georgia is in the midst of doing. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and glad to have you with us. No matter how you get to us today, radio on 960 The Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, video live at 10, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, so many different ways for you to access our program. In fact, maybe even coming soon, some new ways here for 2021. We'll certainly talk more about that hopefully in the days ahead. But either way, just really glad to have you with us today. And a big thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making it all possible. ESOG is a proud partner of UGA. That makes them fun to do business with. It's nice to support businesses that also love and support UGA. Engineered Solutions of Georgia has also been good friends of ours here on DawgNation Daily for a long time as well. And if you're a homeowner, and I am, one of the things that can keep you up at night is anything related to your foundation, or if you feel like you've got some waterproofing issues, those are the kinds of things that can compound on themselves and almost become a snowball type thing that becomes a bigger problem over time. That's why Engineered Solutions of Georgia exists, to solve problems like that. They are a solutions-oriented company. They've got 2 full-time engineers on staff. That means for all the stuff related to your home, waterproofing and foundation, they are there to step in and fix all that for you and give you some peace of mind, what you desperately need. So let me tell you how to get in touch with them. Simply dial this number, 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. All right, I told you we'll catch up with Connor Riley coming up in a couple of minutes' time. Good stuff from Connor, reacting to what he hears from Todd Monken, what he hears from JT Daniels. Those 2 folks speaking to the media here, getting ready for the Peach Bowl on Friday. A lot of offensive chatter coming out of the Peach Bowl press conference today, so we'll look forward to talking about a lot of that. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And speaking of offensive juggernauts, boy, we had a chance to really watch one of those this year in the state of Georgia. How much fun was this to see Brock Vandegrift and his Prince Academy team cap off a great year by winning the state championship yesterday, the single A private state championship there for the state of Georgia. Good story from Jeff Centel at DawgNation.com about this. And I was thinking a little bit about this. I think we may have found the one family, and I say this half serious and half kidding, we may have found the one family out there in the entire universe that has actually had a truly enjoyable 2020. Can you imagine a better year than what the Vandegrift family has had? Brock and his dad, Greg Vandegrift, together winning a state championship for Prince. Brock getting a chance now to go on to the University of Georgia. It just seems like, from the outside looking in, and I follow this on television and through the pages of DawgNation like so many of you have, it just seems like from the outside looking in, this is the kind of magical storybook year that you can really only dream of. And I am so happy for the Vandegrift family, so happy for the Prince community there in Athens to see them, hoisting that state championship, and for Brock Vandegrift individually. Let me also say this here for a moment. There's going to be a lot of talk about what Vandegrift can be in college. I'm no scout. I don't pretend to be. That's not part of my repertoire necessarily. I certainly don't want to put on airs when it comes to to something like that. But you're watching footage of him right now. For those of you who are watching on video, I certainly see a very capable football player, and we've seen him throw on the run this year. We've seen him show his athleticism through injury. More on that in a moment. We have just seen Vandegrift do a little bit of everything. So the fact that he comes from a single A school here in the state of Georgia doesn't scare me off of him at all. I don't want to overpraise here, but let's face it, Herschel Walker once came from Wrightsville in Johnson County, not exactly a gigantic program in its own right. More contemporary examples, I don't know that St. Vincent St. Mary, where LeBron James played his high school basketball, was necessarily, a gigantic program either before James arrived there. Sometimes the player transcends the school or transcends the classification. I think that's possible for Brock Vandegrift as well. I don't think of him as less of a prospect because he played single A ball, nor do I think you should either. I think that Vandegrift's chances of success are just as high had he been playing in the 7A classification or anything like that. Vandegrift just has the look of a special player. Now, listen, nothing is guaranteed, and about half the five-star quarterbacks end up not panning out. If Vandegrift somehow doesn't, he will be far from the first to have that said about him. But the level of play that he's come from, the classification that he's been in, is not a anchor, a governor on his progress, not in the league. It has also been reported, and it's out there, that Vandegrift's dealing with a little bit of a knee injury. Jeff Centel, writing for DawgNation.com yesterday, got a quote from Vandegrift's father and high school coach Greg Vandegrift. What Greg Vandegrift says is that what I think it is a torn PCL. That's a post-cruciate ligament, I think. We'll have an MRI in the morning, and we're going to be at Georgia at 8 o'clock in the morning. So Vandegrift is on his way to UGA as an early enrollee, and I guess the first thing he'll do there is get the evaluation from the Georgia training staff and the Georgia coaches about what to do next from a physical standpoint. It could be that Vandegrift is heading towards a little bit of the surgery. He had this happen for him, though, early on the season. I think the story from Jeff said week 4, something like that. So he's played for more than half the year while dealing with this injury situation. So he's run around plenty. He's shown plenty of mobility, plenty of athleticism. I'm guessing, and once again, The list of things I'm not is pretty long. I said a moment ago I'm not a scout. I'm also not a doctor, so I can't tell you for sure what Vandegrift's health situation is, but you watch him on TV yesterday. He certainly seemed plenty healthy enough. I'm guessing that whatever surgical procedure or rehab procedure he's going to go through is not going to be too constrictive for him. He seems like he's in pretty good shape all the way around, pretty good health. So dealing with a little bit of an injury situation here. But it sounds like, according to the story that Jeff wrote, that the Vandegrift family participated in, it sounds like they're all systems go towards doing what needs to be done now to get him ready to participate in spring practice this upcoming year. Fingers crossed that it's a normal spring practice for the Georgia Bulldogs. So pretty interesting stuff all the way around there. Brock Vandegrift, a state champion, dealing with a little bit of an injury, but a bright future ahead for that young man. It's around the Dawghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And, of course, Marco's Pizza is America's most beloved pizza. It's real, authentic pizza made the Italian way. So much of, my family this time of year is about staying at home and, staying toasty and warm by the fireplace when it's cold outside. Plus, people just want to stay safe, this time of year, in this year in particular. Marco's Pizza gives you a chance to do that. Their pizzas are baked in a 450-degree oven, then delivered contactless, touchless to you after that. They've got so many great options, whether you want the traditional pizza, the pizza bowl, which is the pizza flavor without the crust, the specialty pizzas that are out there like the deluxe, the garden, or the all-meat pizza. Just a lot of great options right now at Marco's Pizza. And speaking of great deals, you can get one of those large specialty pizzas as well for just $13.99 right now. So you can order through the Marco's app or online at marcos.com. It's terrific. Tremendous to have Marco's Pizza delivering around the Dawghouse to us here today. Is Connor Riley ready to go? Okay, that's good stuff. So Connor just heard from Todd Monken, JT Daniels. I have no idea what any of these guys had to say, but it's a fun preview for the Peach Bowl on Friday, and maybe more importantly than that, a fun look at what Georgia could be like in 2021 with hopefully both of these guys coming back. So let's do all of that with Connor Riley right now. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Great to have you with us.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So a lot to get into with Connor Riley here, who has heard from two of the men of the hour for Georgia, certainly, over the course of the conclusion of the regular season. The Georgia offense really found its legs. Todd Monken was a big part of that. No one can deny JT Daniels at quarterback was also a huge part of that as well. Connor had a chance to hear from them. Connor, thanks for being with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG today. It's good to get a chance to talk to you again, and hope you're doing well.
Glad you're back in studio. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Let me begin with this. Was anything said by JT Daniels a moment ago about his status for 2021? I know there had been some speculation based on his social media activity that he was planning on returning. Anything said about that here today?
He was asked that question, whether or not he would come back. He said he hadn't put much thought into it, said he's sort of been taking everything 1 week at a time, so that's something that will almost certainly come after this bowl game. But in sort of reading between the lines here, if I'm allowed to do that, it sounds like from both JT Daniels and Todd Monken, they both, a consistent theme was the excitement that this young offense had going into 2021. So if you want to read between the lines there, I think there's sort of a plan in place for JT to come back next year.
First of all, I love the idea that he hasn't thought that much about it. Connor, can you imagine being a potential, high NFL draft pick at some point in time in your life, whether it be this year, next year, whenever else, and somehow finding things to think about other than that? I always think it's really funny when players, speak that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never know what it's like to try and prepare for the NFL draft, but at the same point in time, I understand where he's coming from, and now you don't want to put the cart before the horse and then go out and play a bad game, and now you're like, well, I was thinking about going pro, and then I played pretty terribly. So I certainly get that mindset from them. Plus, I mean, with today's fan culture and social media and whatnot, if you say you've got 1 foot out the door, fans are going to push you and that other foot out the door right behind you. So I do, while I don't, from a transparency standpoint, don't love it, I do understand why they have to take that stand.
So I was very happy with Todd Monken this year. The Georgia offense wasn't always perfect, but I thought Monken had a good year. And I think it's also interesting, Connor, and you have your finger on the pulse of Georgia fans too. It is very common and normal to see fans criticize play calling there were a lot of times this year when Georgia fans weren't happy with the offense, but I can't think of that many examples when I saw Monken raked over the coals by Georgia fans, and it's not often that offensive coordinators are immune to that kind of criticism. So the fact that you say Monken was speaking about optimism and what seems to be his plans to also be here in 2021, I take that as a really good thing, and I hope that remains true. What else jumped out at you about what Monken had to say today?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing, he was sort of asked about the impact of 2020 and the difficulties this year presented, as well as the Jamie Newman opt-out and what that sort of did to the offense. And I don't think I can say this officially because it's a family-friendly show, but in Forrest Gump, the beloved movie, where he's got that one famous shirt where it says "blank happens."
Right. Yeah.
That was sort of Todd Monken's way of summing up this year. They had a lot of bad beats thrown at them that you think, with wanting to install a completely different offense, which is much more vertically aligned than a horizontal alignment that Jim Chaney and James Cooley sort of used to rely on, to not have spring practice, to have a truncated offseason, to have a full-blown quarterback battle, to have all that thrown in there, and then a guy who was taking starters reps opt out 3 weeks before the season, I guess, to have all that happen. Yeah, it was going to take some time for this offense to congeal and come together, but I think with what you saw at the end of the season, with the young skill players getting better, I think there's real optimism to be had going into 2021, especially, most importantly, if JT Daniels comes back, because just about every wide receiver and skill player is coming back to this team. We'll see about Cook and White. But there's real, I think, optimism for the first time since Kirby Smart's really taken over the head coach of what this passing offense is going to look like going into next year.
You mentioned Jamie Newman a moment ago. How much detail did Monken go into with the Newman situation?
Not much. He sort of briefly touched on it, sort of did what he had to do. I think one of the things that I really appreciate with talking to Todd Monken is you can tell he comes from an NFL background because he's not afraid to share or say his opinion on something, and he sort of, brushed into what it was. He was going through a competition. He made the decision to opt out. They were still in competition mode at that point, and Newman ultimately just made the decision that he had to make.
So there's been a tweet that's gone viral over the last couple of days. It's something to the effect of start an argument not using politics in only 5 words. I guess my response to that would be Daniels could have started versus Florida. That's my 5-word tweet that could start an argument. Did anything come up from either JT, who has spoken some about this, but Monken, who hasn't, did anything come up more about, what the full reasons why it took so long for JT Daniels to emerge as Georgia's starting quarterback?
Not specifically. There was an interesting comment made by Monken with regards to, I think, the impact the pandemic had on his rehab and his rehab ability. There wasn't any specific thing of, who are the code red? Was he ready to go for the Florida game? I think that was just more sort of briefly skirted under the rug a little bit there.
One of the things I do think has been interesting from Daniels, who you heard from today and who we've heard from a couple of times since he's emerged as Georgia's starting quarterback, is the comfort he seems to have in his own skin. And Connor, I don't know that's an easy thing to necessarily do. You kind of come from a California background. You move 3,000 miles away. You're in Georgia. A lot of these guys knew each other better than they knew you. You've got to come in, try to be a leader when these guys don't really know who you are. But it doesn't seem like, to me, Daniels has kind of sidestepped any of that at all. He speaks very confidently, at least when I've heard him talk. I think that he is very good at being comfortable in a way that makes it look easier than it probably is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, he's a guy who was a freshman starter at USC, and Los Angeles, USC is the biggest football team in that city. And so I think having had that experience, I think goes a long way in sort of allowing him to deal with the ups and downs that come with this job. And it's funny, he talked a little bit about his recruitment and what comes there, and he said he just flew to Georgia sight unseen. He had never been here. The first time he landed in the state was when he took a plane to Atlanta to go to Georgia to start working out there. He said his parents had met Coach Smart before he had actually had the pleasure of doing so. So I think that experience in California at USC, growing up as a 5-star quarterback, I think really, really helped him out.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And, we haven't had a chance to talk much after the Missouri game, things like that. I mean, it's very interesting to me how different this Georgia team looks with him at the helm. There's just a comfort offensively that didn't exist before, and there's, for obvious reasons, Daniel's credentials are higher than the other quarterbacks that Georgia had the chance to use this year. How much pressure do you think exists on Monken, on Daniels, on the rest of this offense to now keep that going against a big step up in weight class in competition, a top 10 ranked Cincinnati, as opposed to the kind of more bottom half of the SEC teams, with apologies to Missouri, but more bottom half of the SEC type teams that Georgia's been playing over the course of the last month? How much pressure do you think exists to go out there and show you can do that against a team that's played on television some this year?
I hate to be terribly cliche here, but the Kirby Smart line, pressure is a privilege, comes up. And that's sort of the thing here. I mean, this Cincinnati defense statistically is the best defense in the country in terms of yards per play allowed. It's going to be a slightly tougher test, but I think this is something you want to see this offense take that step. To have Daniels, this is a fairly big game, New Year's Six game against an elite defense. I think this is something where you want to see him make that step, because the next game Georgia plays is against Clemson, and that's a much, much bigger step to open the 2021 season. So you've seen incremental increases. The first game, JT looked great against Mississippi State. Second game, the running game really got going. It all sort of came together against Missouri, and now you get elite competition, or at least statistically elite competition. You want to see this offense with these young skill players, with JT Daniels, make that next step, because we've all talked about 2021 here, and this is a big step for this 2021 season. And that 2021 season, the first game of the season might be either the first most or second most important game that Georgia plays next year.
Yeah, I think that's true. I want to also kind of piggyback off what you just said, but let me close the book before we get there. Anything else from Todd Monken, anything else from JT Daniels that you thought was interesting enough to mention to us here right now?
Todd Monken isn't afraid to go a little blue. I enjoyed that a little bit. I
Wow.
found that pretty fun. I asked him a little bit about Darnell Washington and the tight ends, and just because obviously the Arik Gilbert news and specter of him transferring sort of looms over things right now. And, he loves the way that Darnell has improved. And one of the things I think he's really most excited about that came out of both the Darnell thing, but also another sort of tidbit there, is he really likes these young skill players. George, he mentioned that he was well aware that people were not happy with George Pickens' involvement over the course of the year. So I think there's a legitimate excitement from Todd Monken about what this offense can potentially do in 2021. And if he's that honest and forthcoming, I think that should really excite Georgia fans.
And, listen, you go back and look at even the Kirby Smart era from Jim Chaney in 2016 to Jim Chaney in 2017, there was a gigantic leap year one to year two in terms of the overall offensive output for the program. If the same thing could happen for Todd Monken, and there's plenty of reason to suggest that it could for all the stuff that you mentioned a moment ago, whether it be injury rehabbing quarterback, presumed starter opting out, global pandemic, the idea that Georgia could be on more firm footing offensively in 2021, we're going to hype things up kind of no matter what. That's just kind of what we do around here on DawgNation Daily. But you are not without weaponry if you want to really point to this thing getting far more entertaining and far more enjoyable in 2021. You've got some evidence to back that up if that's the case you want to make.
I don't want to I don't want to build this fire too big here, but if Georgia wins on Friday, which I will predict them to do so, and check out Go With The Flow later this week for our official Against the Spread picks, where I'm 12-2 in my last couple of weeks there. Hot picks.
Toot your horn, my friend.
I think if Georgia wins and plays well against Cincinnati's defense, I think there's a case to be made that Georgia should open the season as the number one team in the country next year, just given what we know about college football now, how offenses rule the day. Alabama's losing most of its offensive line, Devontae Smith, Najee Harris, and Mac Jones. Clemson is losing Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and their top two receivers. Ohio State's probably going to lose Justin Fields and most of their offensive line. With what Georgia is set to bring back at both the skill player positions like running back, quarterback, obviously JT Daniels, assuming he comes back, and that offensive line, there's a case to be made that on paper Georgia has the most talented offense in the country next year. And given with what we know about offenses now, I think there's a case to be made that game against Clemson to open the season. I don't think the pollsters will officially make Georgia the number one team in the country, but that could be a number one versus number two teams in the country to start the season if Friday goes the way it does.
I think it's a compelling case. Admittedly, as a fan, there's a part of me that's not sure I want that. There's a part of me that likes the idea of Georgia in the chaser role just a bit, but as far as, fun fodder goes, looking ahead to the upcoming season, once again, that is a case that can be made, both in terms of what other teams are losing, what other teams, in this case Georgia, bringing back. You can at least make a fairly compelling argument in regards to that.
Yeah, I think there's maybe some gun shyness about that, just given, obviously everyone remembers 2008, the last time they opened up as the number one team in the country, and they still have what will be a top 10 Florida team on their schedule next year, a Clemson team on their schedule. We don't know what the rest of it is going to look like at this point in time, but I think if things go well against Cincinnati, there's going to be, for the first time, I think, really, since Smart has taken over, because obviously the ending of the 2017 season was a bit of a bummer, but significant and legitimate reasons for optimism with at least the offensive side of the ball going into the next season.
All right, let me come back to Friday here just for a moment. I talked about this in the show yesterday, but some of what you just said a moment ago about the Georgia offense, what it wants to prove against Cincinnati's defense, reminds me of this once again, that the notion that somehow this is big bad SEC and Georgia has no respect for Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's the team that plays with a chip on its shoulder in this game because they want to prove the world wrong. I think if anything, it's Cincinnati who's the media darling going into the game. They've been really talked up by a lot of the national writers and pundits, things like that. I think that Georgia does feel the need to go out and get a win against a good team and show that it's better than it proved to be when it faced good teams earlier this year, like Florida and like Alabama. The idea that somehow Cincinnati doesn't get Georgia's best shot on Friday, I think is probably a misunderstanding, and the idea that Georgia doesn't think Cincinnati's worthy of playing with it right now, good luck finding anyone around Georgia who even intimates anything close to that, Connor.
Yeah, I think that's very much a false narrative here. Maybe if Georgia was coming off another demoralizing loss in an SEC championship game, that'd be something we would think about, but this Georgia team wants to just get out there and play games. They only got a chance to play 9 games this season, only got a chance to play 3 in the state of Georgia, and obviously those were all home games, but I think there'll be a big pro-Georgia crowd on Friday, and really, I think this Georgia team just wants to go out and prove that against a good Cincinnati team, a team that on paper had a case as one of the 4 best teams in the playoff, or belonging in the playoff anyway, to prove that, yes, we know in our 2 biggest games of the year, we could not have played any worse, but we are still pretty clearly one of the best teams and programs in the country, and I think winning this game, coupled with a Florida loss to Oklahoma, I think Kirby Smart would very much enjoy it if Georgia got to have sort of its worst season in a while, and Florida had its best, and Georgia still ended up finishing with fewer losses and a higher end-of-season ranking than the Gators.
Very, very good stuff, Connor. Love to think about all of that. Can't wait to read some of what you write, coming off what you've heard from the Georgia guys here today. And, of course, we'll look forward to chatting with you again soon on a lot of video programs coming up in the days ahead. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG. I'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, as always, it's a pleasure, BA. One thing to check out, if you're on Twitter, BA put a lovely tribute to his dad yesterday. He tweeted it out. I retweeted it from my account. Go find it. Go read it. It is incredibly well done, and I could not be more glad to have you back, BA.
It's awesome to say, Connor. Thank you so much. You were very, very kind, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Yep.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
That was really nice of Connor to say that. I appreciate that. And you guys have been very, very warm and welcoming in terms of having me back here, and I appreciate that so much. Thank you very much. We got a lot of SEC Through stuff I want to get to here today. Let me do a quick shout-out to my friends at MyBookie before we get there. It's going to be a big week of bowl games. Georgia's not the only one. College football playoff, everything else. And it's always more fun to have some action down on the games when it comes to bowl season, so make sure you check out MyBookie for that, because listen, they don't care if you've been naughty or nice. They got a gift for you heading towards the bowl season. When you sign up for your first deposit, they're going to give you a big deposit bonus, up to 50% back, up to $1,000 on that. That means that if you let's say you put $2,000 in your account, they're going to give you $1,000 extra play right there on top of that. So you get a big first deposit bonus when you sign up. Then after that, you play, you win, you get paid with my friends at MyBookie. They make it that easy. Just simply find MyBookie on your browser, use the promo code DawgNation. You get the big first deposit bonus. Then after that, you play, you win, you get paid with our friends at MyBookie. Normally, we do our MyBookie best bets here on Tuesday. We're going to do those a little bit later this week just because there's so much going on around the world of the SEC. Now, let me say this as we start our SEC through here. one of the things I try to do my best to do, I try to take the task, the role very, very seriously, to not get, completely, drawn off sides by every rumor that comes out around there. We try to be as responsible as we reasonably can be here on this program. We do take that seriously. However, I will admit, as a fan, I do love the college football rumor mill. I've told you that, plenty of times before, that whatever wild social media chatter is going on, no matter how outrageous it is and no matter how unlikely to be true it turns out to be, I still get kind of drug into all of it, at least in terms of watching it unfold myself. Lurking, I guess, is the word I'm looking for there. I still enjoy doing all of that. So a little bit of that here right now. I just want to point out a rumor that's out there, and listen, there's, I would say, a very good chance none of this comes true. And, obviously from a Georgia standpoint, the reason why I might mention this, a very good chance that doesn't come true. But there was a thing from Tank Bigsby on Instagram that got a little bit of attention. Let me show you this on screen. So this guy tweets this out. The guy is an Auburn fan that tweets this out. He says, okay, I'm definitely not reading too much into this Instagram story from Tank Bigsby. Nope, not me, not at all. That's the Auburn fan. What he did was screen grab something from Bigsby's Insta story. Now, obviously, these things disappear for 24 hours, so that's why you need the tweet to capture the thing. And what Bigsby writes is, y'all going to be mad about this, but I got to do what I got to do. Now, some people wonder, what does that mean? It does look like from the picture, now you can't show the whole thing here, it does look like he may have been in a manicure parlor of some sort, so maybe that's all that he's referencing there, just getting a mani-pedi. Listen, we don't judge when it comes to stuff like that. You obviously want to be clean. So maybe that's all this is for Bigsby, but obviously with the changeover coaching staff, moving from Gus Malzahn to Brian Harsin, there's always going to be a lot of rumors that are out there. There's already been a lot of that kind of stuff when it comes to star players in the SEC. We already kind of know that. Is Bigsby going to be a part of this rumor mill now? I would say that this Instagram story alone is not enough to put it there, but this is why we do like this time of year. We want to be responsible. We want to be paying attention to, the facts. But admittedly, every now and then we're kind of attracted to a rumor. So we'll follow that and see where it goes. As of right now, it's not going anywhere, but we shall see on that. Something that's a little more substantial because it has been at least officially reported. Doug Samuels from Football Scoop saying that Shane Beamer, South Carolina coach, going to make a big move towards Florida's cornerbacks coach Dorian Gray. Gray's a pretty respected member of the Gators staff. He's actually thought to be a pretty good recruiter. And he has a relationship with Shane Beamer going back some time at Virginia Tech. So Beamer apparently going after him to make this happen. Now, all I can say is, and this is where my opinion kind of creeps in on this, I'd love nothing more than for Beamer to swoop in and steal an assistant from Florida, especially with a recruit like Terrion Arnold still kind of hanging in the balance here heading towards February. Any kind of subtraction from Florida's defensive backs coaching staff I would view as a pretty good thing. But admittedly, the idea that South Carolina, which any way you slice it, is a lesser program than Florida is, the idea that the Football Scoop report ends up being true, that Beamer is able to successfully pull Gray away from Florida, I'm guessing that's probably not going to happen, I'm guessing. But once again, that's kind of out there as these SEC programs do try to stock their coaching staffs, get the top flight assistants. We've said this a lot in the past, that much the same way there's never going to be enough elite players to go around for all the big-time programs, there is also not enough elite assistant coaches, the guys who want to burn the candle at both ends, the guys that can really get it done on field from a player development standpoint, off the field from a recruiting standpoint. There's never going to be enough of those, and there's always going to be a jockeying for position amongst coaches, especially new coaches into the SEC, when it comes to stuff like that. It is fair to point out that Beamer did get Will Friend away from Tennessee, but Vols fans weren't exactly shedding tears about that given the way that the Tennessee offensive line played this year. So we will continue to watch the work for guys like Shane Beamer trying to put a coaching staff there together. Speaking of the Gators, Trevon Grimes, Kadarius Toney both announced they will not be playing in Florida's upcoming bowl game. They're moving on to the NFL. This is not a surprise necessarily, but it does point out what is very much going to be a new look Florida Gators team for next year. And we talked off the top of the show about being more than just a good team. You want to be a good program, a program that has some, is it perpetuity? Is that the word I'm looking for here? A program that can be good year after year after year. Some of that for Florida is going to be tested here this upcoming season, whether it be Anthony Richardson at quarterback or Emory Jones, new skill position players. Obviously, Florida's already utilized the transfer market, bringing in Bowman, the running back from Clemson. Maybe they lean in that direction again. But Florida's ability to refill, to reload, and get back and come back and be competitive in 2021, that's going to be a major offseason story. Big names on their way out the door. The opposite of that seems to be going on in Arkansas. By the way, huge credit to Sam Pittman. I think at this point in time, he's got like his entire two deep of offensive linemen coming back to the program. They are all choosing to take that extra year of eligibility for Arkansas next season. You've also got the all-SEC linebacker Grant Morgan, who's coming back next year as well. You know, one of the things that Pittman has really been selling is the idea that players are buying into what he's trying to do there in Fayetteville, and the number of players choosing to come back would seem to be a pretty good piece of evidence of that. Just an incredible job. You know, I'm going to get, kind of more into this. In fact, I'll kind of do this together here for a moment. There was some debate about who the SEC coach of the year was supposed to be. A guy like Nick Saban, who kind of ran through the year undefeated, or a guy like Sam Pittman at Arkansas, who did more than was expected, going 5-5, whatever it was that they win. Like, which of those coaches is more deserving to be honored? Here's all I'll say about that. It is just as hard to win 5 games at Arkansas with the talent you have there as it is to win all 10 of your regular season games, now 11 for Nick Saban, Alabama, given the talent you have at your disposal. That the job of a coach is obviously to acquire talent, but when you're a guy like Pittman and you step into a situation the way that he stepped into, winning as many games as he did is pretty impressive. I have really liked what Pittman has done there at Arkansas. Getting players to come back is certainly another example of that. By the way, speaking of Alabama, Steve Sarkisian was honored as the winner of the Broyles Award. And also, speaking of Arkansas, the legendary former Arkansas coach Frank Broyles. But the Broyles Award for the nation's top assistant, Sarkisian, getting that honor yesterday. No surprise there. The Alabama offense was amazing this season, and that is certainly a truthful statement. And the success that Sarkisian has enjoyed, he's about to get himself a big raise. He may make more than $3 million next year as the Alabama offensive coordinator. Just an unheard of sum of money for an assistant. But it's the success of Sarkisian that I would say also calls me to question, whether Alabama coach Nick Saban is truly the coach of the year in the SEC or college football or anything else. At this point in time, I don't even believe that Saban is the most important coach on Alabama's coaching roster anymore. To me, it's clearly Sarkisian. We saw Saban miss a game, and he almost missed the Georgia game, and Alabama didn't skip a beat. How would have things been different if Sarkisian had been forced to miss a game? We'll never know. It didn't happen, but if it did, I think his loss would have been felt far more than Nick Saban's would have been. So Sarkisian, amazing success right now at Alabama, and he, to me, at the moment, is the indispensable Alabama coach, with all due respect to Nick Saban, who's one of the greatest of all time. A couple more things here real quick on kind of an extended SEC through. I saw a very interesting stat yesterday where Alabama, as a 20-plus point favorite, I think it was Chris Felica who's had this number, as a 20-plus point favorite in a bowl game. That's actually rarefied air for any favorite in any bowl game. I think you've only had 2 teams in the history of the bowl system who've ever been a bigger favorite in a bowl than what Alabama is against Notre Dame heading into Friday's college football playoff semifinal matchup. So not a great look for the CFP to see that big of a disparity going into the game. In terms of a point spread, it does speak to how successful the Crimson Tide have been this season, and the fact that there's not really a team you could have put in that number 4 spot, I guess, that could have conceivably played a more competitive game, at least from a point spread standpoint. But not a great look to see Bama as a 20-plus point favorite in the college football playoff. One final thing to note here. Music City Bowl is canceled between Iowa and Missouri. I hate it for both sides. It has just been a really tough year around college football, and teams have done the best they can under the circumstances. The Music City Bowl, another example of that. All right, so let's finish here on a happy, good note. I told you yesterday that we are now just 6 days away from the return of Eddie, the blind squirrel, the DawgNation Daily unofficial mascot, or I guess at this point in time he's the official mascot. But that's right, the Gator Hater strikes back starting Monday, January the 4th. Eddie will return here to the desk, to the set. We're going to have a tremendous welcome back for him and a brand new Gator Hater segment as Georgia fans look forward to a chance to get some revenge. It'll be sweet if it happens. A chance to get some revenge on those lousy, stinking Gators. So when we turn the calendar to the new year, 2021, we will welcome Eddie back on the show, and we will look forward to hating on some lousy, stinking Gators. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Have a good day, and I'll look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down, where we celebrate them for the great work they do with air conditioning systems, maybe not quite so important to you right now. Heating systems, I know that really matters to you at the moment. Plumbing and electric, they do all those things for you. This is the time of year when you want to stay toasty and warm, especially at night. And if you've got a cold-natured wife like I do, 2 cold-natured children who always want to make sure they're warm, then you got to make sure that heating system is ready to go. And those folks in my house will tell me if it's not working. I promise you that. So get the peace of mind you need by checking out my friends at R.S. Andrews. Get your system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Go to rsandrews.com and find out more about that. All right, we got some time for your comments. We went pretty long with comments yesterday. We probably won't go nearly as long here today, if you don't mind. I did start on YouTube yesterday, so I'll be happy to start here on Facebook today as we get ready for the Peach Bowl and everything else that's going on around the world of UGA here. So let's get some comments, and we'll get ready to go. Mike Gay on the subject of Randy Quaid, I believe, is what's being discussed there. A lookalike, if you will, to Florida coach Dan Mullen. Jermaine King giving us the and-on video. Mike Zambiasi says that was a quick hour. I'm glad to hear that. I'm happy to know it. I'm happy to know that. Clarence Dawson, yeah, it's good to have the entire band back together. Michael Carvel in studio this year today. Connor was here yesterday, was on the phone today, so it's kind of nice to get everybody back. Ken Feinberg says that, yeah, maybe Eddie was like Tank Bigsby and getting his own mani-pedi. That's not, that could very well be. That could very well be the case. Robert A. Smith says, any update on Gilbert? Yeah, my guess is that's going to be kind of quiet on that front until at least after the bowl situation is over. And then after that, who knows? I mean, first of all, he's got to, I guess he doesn't have to go in the transfer portal, but conceivably, logically, he would go into the portal and then, announce his transfer destination after that. So as it stands right now, he's not even officially on the open market. I mean, listen, I can promise you we're going to be, trying to put our ear to the ground as much as we can on this topic once this game on Friday is behind us, because I do think it's a huge deal. I mean, I think that Gilbert is a phenomenal playmaker. People say, would you chortle? You better believe, for the folks who know the old school, kind of chortle there, the Rick Gilbert thing would be huge for me. So we're going to just kind of try to listen in and hear what we get, but there is a chance that's going to be pretty quiet for a while. Connor Graham, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Very, very nice of you. Thank you. Michael Webb, already looking forward to that Georgia-Florida game next year. I'd love to see that. Mitch Marchman bringing up a pretty good point that it wasn't called a New Year's Six game back then. We called them BCS bowls back then. But in a BCS bowl against a group of 5 team Hawaii in 2007, Georgia, as he says, kind of boat raced the Rainbow Warriors that day, or is it just the Rainbows now? Either way, used that as a springboard to be preseason number 1 in 2008. That the same thing could happen going into 2021. It's an interesting comparison. It very much is an interesting comparison there. Randy Hall says, my Christmas wish list, Terry Arnold commits to the Dogs. I'm with you there. A Rick Gilbert transfers in, and Jordan Davis and Tyson Campbell stay. Yeah, that'd be big on all 4 of those fronts, Randy. I really like that. Really like that. Connor Graham says, can we talk about the linebacker and cornerback position? So we did talk about cornerback off the top of the program. The fact that Stokes is definitely gone, as Randy mentioned there. The possibility that Tyson Campbell could be considering one thing or the other. And the fact that Keely Ringo, as what Dan Lanning said yesterday, appears to be very much on track for maybe great success in 2021. I really like that situation. And an outside linebacker, if you want to talk about linebackers here for a moment, I mean, I will admit that I understand a little bit about what Jermaine Johnson said on his way out the door, or at least what has been presumed that he said, that he wants to go to a place like Florida State. Johnson himself hasn't said this, but we presume that he wants to go and be a star somewhere and get a chance to pass rush on every play and, put up big stats. I do understand a little bit of that. Now, I've said that the counter to that is if a guy like Azeez Ojulari, who also played in kind of an ensemble cast here, if he goes on to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft, then you can't say that what Georgia's doing with its outside linebackers isn't working. You can't say that at all. But I do think it'd be nice in 2021, if whether it's a Nolan Smith or whoever else, to kind of turn that guy into a big stat guy, kind of a superstar type player, household name within SEC circles. I do think that'd be a pretty good step forward for Georgia, because I do think guys like that, you don't have to be as good as Chase Young, but when you're a Chase Young type player and you get yourself into a bind against a good offense like what Florida had this year or what Alabama had this year, a big-time individual player like that can be an eraser for you. And so I think it's appropriate to say that could be a next step for UGA defensively. And one of the ways, I know Dan Lanning spent a lot of time yesterday talking about what defenses can do here in 2020 with the offensive explosion that's going on all around college football. To me, that's one thing you can do. If you've got a Derek Stingley, which LSU had in 2019, otherwise not a great defense, but they did have a superstar that played like a superstar, especially over the second half of the season. What Alabama had in 2018 with Quinnen Williams, interior pass rusher type guy. That if you've got that one really big guy, big name, superstar type player, that it can negate some of what's happening with these explosive offenses. So I think that's probably a fair comment. Clay Dykes, this is a good question. Any New Year's resolutions? I got the same resolutions as everybody else. And I try not to have too many, because obviously it's a little harder to, things that you kind of set up as a New Year's resolution, sometimes it's a little bit harder to achieve that. But mine are the same as everybody else's. I'm trying to save a little bit more money, trying to lose a little bit more weight, especially the weight thing. You go back and look at me over the course of the last couple of years. If you did a mashup of my face just from every show one day to the next, it's like I go in and out. I kind of balloon up and, contract back a little bit. So hopefully we can find a little bit more consistent weight here in 2021. I'm hopeful for that. Mark McDowell says, how many more years does JT Daniels have to play? So Daniels was a true freshman in 2018, took a redshirt year in 2019, playing this year in 2020. So technically he could leave college after this year. He's 3 years removed from high school, but he's going to come back to Georgia next year, and I guess that'll officially make him a redshirt junior. Is that right? He's a redshirt sophomore right now. He'll be a redshirt junior next year. Quarterbacks don't stay any longer than they have to, but technically he would have another year beyond that if he wanted that. But these quarterbacks, when they can go, they typically would. And I think there's a chance that the JT might consider going this year if he felt truly confident about how that medical evaluation is going to go. The medical evaluations are very, very tough. The NFL does not want to make an investment in someone who may have, not a full health, clean bill of health. And so obviously Daniels is running around playing healthy for Georgia right now, but he wants to be healthier. Maybe he wants to be a little bit more bulletproof in that medical evaluation. If I had to guess, that may be why he ultimately ends up coming back. Isaac Cruz got the Dogs by 21 over Cincinnati. That's a bold prediction. Very bold prediction. I guess I got to get my prediction ready to go. I don't quite have one ready yet. I need to get mine ready to go. Let me go to YouTube here for a moment. I didn't realize this. Carl Barr says that Georgia leads the series against Clemson 42-18-4. Has Georgia really dominated that series that much? That's very interesting. I didn't know it was that much. I thought it would be a little closer than that. Oren Chile, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. That's awesome to hear. Thank you very much. David Williams, I agree with you. I think Jamie Newman's going to get drafted. I don't think – I think there's a pocket of college football fans who want guys to get punished when they choose to opt out. NFL teams are just greedy for talent. They don't care about stuff like that. Maybe they should. I don't think they do. And, I do think that Newman may have hurt his chances to move up the draft board. The notion that he could have been a second-round pick or something like that, maybe even a first-round pick. We talked about that. I think by not playing at Georgia this year, if I had to make an assumption, my assumption is he probably got hurt in his chances to do that. But being the kind of draft pick that can make a roster and have a chance at, being on an NFL team and one day earning the right to play, my guess is that Newman's probably still on track for that. Bank 6 says, which position group do you think has the most to gain the Peach Bowl? That's a really interesting question. Is offensive line a good answer? Because we know Trey Hill's not playing. We know Ben Cleveland's not playing. We know there's a little bit of a transition to a newish look offensive line for next year. Can those guys do a little bit like what this group did in the Sugar Bowl last year? We just come together, play well for this game, and maybe set up for some success next season. I think that I think offensive line might be my answer to that. Jay Parker says, with that in mind, any chance that Salyer moves to guard? I would certainly be interested in seeing that. I do think that Salyer's highest and best value to Georgia is probably as a guard, that if you could get tackles to emerge to allow Salyer to slide back inside, I think Georgia would be better because of that, either at left or right guard. Hasheem Spike says Coach Dooley really owned Clemson for the most part. I guess maybe he did. See, this is where my era kind of obscures my history a little bit, because when I became a big Georgia fan, Georgia Clemson was a really tough game for Georgia. This is kind of like, I don't really remember Kevin Butler kicking the game-winning field goal against Clemson in 1984. I'm not quite old enough to remember that. I have like a vague memory of, like, say, Georgia winning the Cotton Bowl in 1983, but not, a memory of all the games around that time. I kind of came of age a little bit after that. I want to say Clemson maybe won 2 straight against Georgia in 86 and 85 and 86 maybe. Maybe not 85, but Clemson was kind of becoming that ACC power in that mid 80s, and that was a tough game for Georgia back then. And one of the things that I'll tell you is for as much as I believe that Georgia Florida is the biggest rival, there's a time back then that Georgia Clemson felt like as big a rivalry game as Georgia played. I mean, it was a huge, Michael Carvel, who's kind of that same age, kind of remembers that. Georgia Clemson in the 80s was a huge rivalry game. College football was weird back then because you only played 11-game schedule. You only played 6 SEC games. That Georgia played almost as many games outside the SEC as it did inside the SEC. And so Georgia Clemson was a gigantic rivalry back then. Bubby Dean says Butler kicked it 100,000 miles. Yeah, I love the Munson quote from that. See, this is kind of the way that I came of age with a lot of this kind of stuff. Some of y'all are too young to even remember what cassette tapes are, but my grandfather had all these cassette tapes of like the Munson stuff, and so like my parents would go to my grandparents' house on Sunday nights, and sometimes they'd play this kind of stuff. I kind of grew up hearing about all these legends and stuff like that. And so I'm not old enough to remember kind of the best moments of the Dooley era, the Herschel era, Butler. But I'd certainly learned about those things through the magic of cassette tapes and things like that back then. Jerry Dogs fan says, will UGA be favored to win the East next year? I believe they will. I believe they'll be whether it be the media favorite or the true Vegas favorite, I believe they probably will. He says, I don't see Florida being that good. There's definitely some pressure on Florida to prove that they can, rebuild. LSU didn't successfully do that from 2019 to 2020. Florida going to have a chance to do that. I ran into a Florida fan that I know the other day, and he was pushing the idea of Anthony Richardson being quarterback instead of Emory Jones. So I'm guessing if a Florida fan's saying that, he's hearing that from other Florida fans too. He's not the only one who feels that way. So maybe there's a belief that the best quarterback of the future for Florida isn't Jones, it's Richardson instead. So whoever emerges out of that quarterback situation will be a big part of that, that conversation. Thomas Tyson says, come on, BA. I'm 28, and even I know what cassette tapes are. That's actually good to know. I'm happy to know that. I just really don't think my kids know what cassette tapes are. It's also kind of funny, too, when they kind of see like there's the line in Home Alone. We watch Home Alone a lot this time of year where like Joe Pesci's character is excited about stealing from the McAllisters because they have all these VCRs. My kids are always like, what's a VCR? Why is he so excited about stealing one? It's just kind of a very funny dated reference in a terrific movie. Jarvis Hanna says, where's Eddie? On Monday, less than a week from today, Eddie will make his triumphant return. Blake Pillsbury says, I still remember before the season, Florida fans wanted Emory Jones to start over Trask. Yeah, Blake, sometimes that's the way it goes. Fans can be a little fickle, so maybe Florida fans are being that fickle right now. Matt Rukavina already calling his shot, saying Florida, even with their Sherman ultra-soft non-conference schedule, win 8 games max next year. Boy, that's fun to think about. Richard Sheffield says, how about this? You're talking about go ahead and getting your 2021 preview started. He says, this is very interesting from Richard. He says, if we win the East, we likely have to play Clemson and Bama during the season and then play Clemson and Alabama again during the college football playoff. That is an amazing thought, Richard. That is an amazing thought. Pretty well said. Good stuff, Richard. Randy Hall says, please have a commitment chain for Eddie. We may have a surprise. I told you I had a chance to buy a commitment chain the other day. It was $30, and I chose not to. But we may have a surprise coming for Eddie this upcoming week. We may do that. I'm efforting behind the scenes here. Kathy Aquavia Green also does not think Florida will be very good next year, and certainly from your lips to God's ears on that. I mean, I think for me, it all kind of comes down to how much transfer work does Florida do to replace some of what they lost right now. Obviously, we know they're not replacing a lot of that within their recruiting apparatus. I'm not being snarky. I'm being serious. But, listen, you go out and bring a guy like Justin Shorter, and he's paid some dividends. Bowman, the running back they brought, Lingard from Miami, didn't really do much. But, there's a chance that bringing in Bowman from Clemson, he does. By the way, here it is, a Florida fan on YouTube. Nature Gator says, Emory Jones, unless he gets hurt, will be the starting quarterback for the Gators next year, but Richardson's going to be very good in the future. So Nature Gator weighing in on that. Duds47 already looking forward to seeing Dominic Blaylock next season. He says, does he reclaim a starting role over Burton? I think Burton's going to be pretty tough to beat out, but I definitely think there's going to be a big role for Dominic Blaylock in the offense. All right, we do have to go. Anything else? Jay Thompson says Clemson isn't the same Clemson in the old days. Remember that. It is kind of fun to see these teams back playing again here. DMart42 says, do your kids know what CDs are? Yeah, I think they do know CDs because I'm not super techie. I have Spotify, but sometimes my wife's car, I can't quite figure out how to get it hooked up and running. So she has a CD player. So, we've listened to CDs in my wife's car plenty. So I think my kids know what CDs are from that. Frank Patterson, I love where your head is. He says, do we have an invasion location in Charlotte for next year? Looking forward to meeting you all. Last year we spent all the winter planning all this stuff, and ultimately ended up not happening because of the global pandemic. But I am already looking forward to a big, big day in Charlotte for that game. So, yeah, hopefully, Frank, we can talk more about that as we head towards the future. Hopefully that. DMart42 also on DJ Uiagalelei. Yeah, a good-looking quarterback prospect in his own right. No question about that. Yeah, so it sounds like Jay wants to be there too. I can't wait to hopefully get a chance to see a lot of you guys this upcoming year. It feels like it's been forever since we've seen anybody in person. It really does. Really does. All right, anything else? Clarence Dawson says, I need to patent the just one more comment. Yeah, maybe so. Chad Buchanan says, Dog Nation invasion for opening day. I hope so, Chad. I hope so. Randy Hall, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. You guys are great. I can't wait for the rest of this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. So y'all have a good day. and I will look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. By the way, don't forget, check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. Just going to find them online at rsandrews.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. I'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody.